Hi, good afternoon, good morning for those who are in this time. It depends what time this message is reaching you. I will say good morning, good afternoon, and good night because this message is going to the entire world and the time is different. Today we have a special edition with Dr. Gehlawedewos Araia to address the conversation between Tedros and the Congresswoman Karen Bass. When I talk about politics and history in Ethiopia, the first person that comes to my mind is Dr. Gehlawedewos Araia because he's a professor who is a political expert who knows about the Tigray history and the Ethiopian history. So I have to discuss this with Dr. Gehlawedewos to prevent misinformation and disinformation. So we have our plan is to send the message, the correct history to those who are politically in power. Uh, elected officials like congresswoman, congressman, whoever is in power in this world. So, Dr. Gehlawedewos, thank you so much for coming here with cyber to discuss about this matter with cyber power of Tigray media. Thank you.
Hey, thank you to Mr. Ephraim for inviting me to discuss in this program. Thank you.
Great. So, as you heard or watched the video, the conversation that they have, Tedros and Congresswoman Karen Bass, they were talking about the Ethiopian history. Like the message is definitely clear that Tigrayans are dividing Ethiopia. Anyways, what is the purpose of the conversation that they have broadcast between Tedros and Congresswoman Karen Bass? Thank you so much.
Okay, that's very good. I personally don't know who this guy is really, this Tedros Teshome, but he had a direct contact with Congresswoman Karen Bass. So my interest actually now is not so much Tedros, but the Congresswoman really, because she was simply listening. He was talking nonstop on the video that I watched yesterday. And it looks like our honorable Congresswoman doesn't know much about the history, modern history of Ethiopia or of Tigray. So it's really important that I convey a message, use this opportunity and convey a message to the Congresswoman. As far as I'm concerned, the video that I watched yesterday, I was really dismayed, as a matter of fact. But I am used to that kind of disinformation, whitewash analysis, if we call it analysis. But as far as I'm concerned, it is a propaganda piece by a friend of Abiy Ahmed. I am told now that Tedros Teshome is a good friend of Abiy Ahmed. He grew up in Jimma, and they knew each other very well. And he's doing this lobbying and propaganda things for the person in power. At any rate, what's going on here is Abiy Ahmed and people like Tedros and other chauvinist elements surrounding the government have this ambition to dismantle the federal structure. They've done it already. And the Constitution. They emasculated the Constitution as well. And then find a new unitarian Ethiopian state. Okay, this is their ambition, this is their wish, but they are being challenged by the federalist forces. One of these federalist forces, of course, is the Tigray Defense Forces. And then we have the Command, the Agao, the Benishangul, the Afar, the Gambela, the Sidama, and the Oromo. There are many of them fighting the government. It's not just Tigray. Of course, Tigray is the most powerful. That's why they all came with all their armies, surrounded Tigray. Remember, beginning November 4, 2020. And then they want to destroy Tigray, destroy not just Tigray, but commit genocide over the people of Tigray, and they have done it. They committed genocide because the challenge comes from Tigray all the time. Tigray is a leader of the Ethiopian state historically, okay? So they are terrified by Tigray. That's why they keep on talking about TPLF, TPLF. It's not TPLF alone. TPLF actually had this dominant role in the coalition government from 1991 to 2018. But there were the Amhara and the Oromo and others as well, the Dabuk Southern Ethiopian peoples as well. They shared the power. They had power. Okay? So they keep on talking about TPLF, single out TPLF, but they never mention EPRDF. The governing party was the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, a coalition of 4 groups. They don't want to tell about that. But anyway, the ultimate objective, and why Tedros was telling Ambassador Bass, is they want to have a unitarian state, one state, unified, geographically delimited, and then eliminating the nationality autonomous regions. And then one language, Amharic, like we had it during Emperor Haile Selassie. Okay? The Ethiopians are not going to go back to that old days now, because the nationalities are now conscious enough to actually jealously guard their self-determination. The Gambela movement clearly said last time, because I read their memo, and they said, we are not going to work anymore with Abiy Ahmed. He has betrayed us, and we're going to fight him militarily, they said. The Sidama are determined to have their own, they have already their own autonomous regional state, but they want to keep that regional state. The Afars was the same thing. The Benishangul, same thing. The Agao and Command, who never had autonomous regions, are now going to have it by their own struggle. Okay? So, but the majority of Ethiopians actually support the federal structure, not a unitarian, old-fashioned, geographically delimited, and predominantly one language, Amharic. They're not going to accept that. But anyway, it's important that we in the diaspora, including myself, send a straightforward, open, and candid message to Congresswoman Karen Bass. The Congresswoman Karen Bass is the representative of the 37th district in California. This is the Los Angeles area. Okay? So I want to send a clear message to her, so that she can have at least the other perspective, not just Tedros Teshome, but other perspective as well. And the realities on the ground in Ethiopia too, she has to know. For this apparent reason, thus, I like to delve into some history and discuss the issues surrounding Western Tigray. You remember? Tedros said there is no such thing as Western Tigray. This was taken from the Amhara by the Tigrayans in 1991, blah, 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 blah. And he was talking, Tigray is always a problem. He doesn't even know what happened during the era of Princess. He says, Suhul Mikhail came and blah, blah, blah. That's rubbish. You see, people don't know history. I want to make that straight now so that people understand what happened actually during, very briefly, I'm going to say. Suhail Mikhail, actually, one of the powerful Tigrayan aristocrat during the princess era of princess, or we call it Zaman Masafant. Actually, the true history is he was invited by Empress Mentuap because there was crisis in Gondar. Her son, Emperor Iyasu, was assassinated. And then there was a problem. Who is going to be the succeeding king? Eoas. Eoas was going to succeed, but there was a problem between Mentuap and then the widow of Emperor Iyasu. So instead of going through chaos and problem and civil war, why don't we invite Suhail Mikhail? That's how he entered Gondar. Of course, he assumed power by eliminating Eoas. This is true. But he did not simply march from Tigray to create problem to Ethiopia. What kind of history does this guy know? He doesn't know anything. Then he returned back to Tigray after a while, of course. That's the true history. Anyway, the other thing is he said there was no Western Tigray because he doesn't know that Western Tigray, the so-called Western Tigray, is Salamti, Wolqait, and Tsagade. Okay? This actually was part of Tigray for a long period of time. As I'm going to explain in a while, it was actually joined, Wolqait was joined to Begemudur before Gondar. It used to be called Begemudur during the Emperor Haile Selassie. It was cut off from Tigray and was put under Begemudur in 1948. He doesn't want to mention this. and I hope the Honorable Congresswoman is going to listen to what I'm talking about now. 1949. I'm not talking about ancient history. On the other side, the Kobo, Raya Kobo, it was cut off from Tigray and put under Wollo province in 1949. And we have eyewitness account for this. For the other ones, we have documentary evidence, of course. And then I'm going to continue with this one so that people can understand more of history. I have documentary evidence why Wolqait was part of Tigray and why Kobo was part of Tigray as well. So you want me to continue with this, or what do you want me to do, Mr. Ephraim?
Yeah, my next question will be, that was a great explanation that you gave us. This is what I'm trying to say, those elected officials, to reach the right people, the right person, those who knows about the political and the true history of Ethiopia, so that way they don't have to mislead or disinform and misinform other people. So thank you so much about the explanation that you gave me. The second question that I have is, how should we counter Tedros Teshome historical and geographical claims of Amhara territory? Okay, which is you already explained that some of it, but I just want to emphasize that exactly what my question is, and in brief history, I will also share the map, the old map and the new map, so that way you can emphasize this question. Thank you.
Okay, hold on to that map. Uh, First, yeah, I really I don't know this dwarf guy. I wish I could have some scholar or intellectual who could debate with me. I wish I could have one. Uh, I'm not trying to belittle this guy. He has his own perspective, his own whatever. I don't care. However, the most important thing is the Congresswoman now. She has to know. So, uh, by countering, actually, for me, it means providing documentary evidence. I'm a scholar, I'm a professor, that's my job. That's how I teach, by the way. I always come up with evidences. Okay? So uh, I have actually like 10 of them, but anyway, these are brief. Uh, the first documentary evidence is a book written by a Portuguese missionary by the name Manuel Baradas. That book was written in 1634. 1634. Here we go. This is the book, 1634. And the book actually says right here, a 17th century historical and geographical account of Tigray, Ethiopia. Okay? It says it. In this book, there is a map. If you can bring now the old map, 17th century map of Tigray. Okay, we have a map actually right there. Can you bring the map, the 17th? Okay, that's the one. The other one. Yes, that one. It's blinking, and I probably could show our audience from here. If you cannot bring it, I can put it from here too. You want to bring it? You want to try? Okay, post it. It's
Yeah.
for some reason it's not doing it. That's fine.
Okay.
If you cannot have it, I have it right here now. Right here, the map right here. You can see the map right here. Okay, on the map, this map actually, incredibly, this map now is 4 times the size of the modern map of Tigray. 4 times. It's really incredible. When I calculated the area of that old map, 17th century Tigray, it came slightly over 80,000 square kilometers. The present modern Tigray is slightly over 21,000 square kilometers. So actually, Tigray was cut off left and right throughout the centuries. Okay? If you see now the map right here, the map right here, on the northern front, northern part of that map, there is what they call Dahlak Islands, which are now part of Eritrea on the Red Sea. On the southern part, all the way down, it says Doba. By Doba means Aloha Malash. We call it Aloha Malash now. The river called Aloha, that was actually the border of Tigray with the rest of Ethiopia. And then on the eastern part, we have Danakil or Afar near the Red Sea again. And then if you go to the west, all the way west, there's Simeon and Lima Lemo. Of course, in the book, Baradas says the border, some of them say the border of Tigray is Takaze, but some of them also say, he says, border is Lima Limo. Lima Limo. Okay, Lima Limo is beyond Takaza. Okay, this is a 1634 evidence. And Baradas, apparently, Manuel Baradas was living in a small village between Adwa and Aksum. He was trying to promote the Catholic faith, Catholicism, but he was not successful. He had to go to Yemen, and in 1634 he wrote this book. But this book was not translated until 1996, thanks to the late Professor Richard Pankhurst. He was the one who, through a Portuguese lady, translated the book from Portuguese to English. And then I found it. It's a fantastic evidence. It's not just about geography and map. It has a lot of things about the culture of Tigray as well. Okay, this is one. Number two is in the 1620s. This is early 17th century now. There was a powerful aristocrat in Tigray. And this powerful aristocrat apparently has a similar name like mine. Same name like mine, actually, Gehlawedewos. His name is the Gehlawedewos Gehlawedewos. He was the governor of Shire, but he was also the governor of Wolkite and Sarai. Sarai now is in Eritrea. And then he governed, his dominion was Shire, Wolkite, and Sarai. That's another evidence. During that time, the king of Ethiopia was Susunius. He was at Impharaz. Impharaz is, before Gondar was founded, the capital was Impharaz. So that's another second evidence. The third evidence is when Emperor Ieyasu, the one I mentioned earlier, ruled from Gondar, 1682 to 1706 now. There was another powerful aristocrat by the name Degezmati Naizgi. He was the governor of Wolkite. He was governing Wolkite from Adi Ramatz. Adi Ramatz is the capital of Wolkite. Naizgi, whether you go left or right, is a Tigrinya name. Okay? Naizgi. That's another one. The fourth, number four, is another Portuguese missionary by the name Manuel Almeida. And Manuel Almeida, like Baradas, came to Tigray or Ethiopia in 1622. These are early 1600s. Okay, this is the 17th century now. And interestingly, Manuel Almeida actually says in his book, he wrote a book about Tigray as a whole. He actually wrote a book entitled History of Ethiopia. In that book, Almeida says, the foundation and head of Ethiopia is Tigray. Okay? But this is not really that great or important to me. The most important thing and relevant to what I'm talking about today is Almeida says the beginnings of Tigray are the twin ports of Massawa and Hergigo. People don't know about this. The beginnings of Tigray are Massawa and Hergigo. And you remember, I told you already about Baradas. He said Dahlak Islands were part of Tigray. Okay. Number five evidence is we have the eyewitness account of Almeida was corroborated or supported by two important British scholars, Buckingham and Huntingford. These two people actually write a book about Tigray in 1593 and 1646, around that area. And they also supported what Almeida said. All these areas are part of Tigray. Then comes number 6, another evidence. His name is J. Ludolf. J. Ludolf, a German scholar. Actually, Ludolf is credited for being the first to come up with the idea of Ethiopian studies. So some historians put him as father of Ethiopian studies. Anyway, Ludolf also writes a book entitled A New History of Ethiopia. His book was published in 1682. Okay? In his book, Ludolf says, Tigray had, or has, because he has to say has, I'm saying had because it's of the past. Tigray has 27 provinces. Imagine, the present Tigray is so small compared to what Ludolf is talking about. 27. He says, including Wag. Wag is in Wollo now. 27. He actually doesn't say provinces, he says prefectures. Prefecture means district. 27 districts are really, really enormous. So that means Tigray was so big by that account. The number 7 evidence is Michael Russell. Michael Russell also writes a book entitled Nubia and Abyssinia. The book was published in 1833, 1833, okay? And then Russell actually, without question, puts Walqait as part of Tigray. He also mentions the monastery, Waldeba, that is part of Tigray. Anyway, what Michael Russell says is the geographic area of Tigray consists of central Tigray. He says central Tigray, even today we say central Tigray to the Adwa, Aksum area. Okay? And then he says Inderta, Wajrat, Afla, Lasta, Abergille, Simen. Where's Simen now? Okay? Tembien, Shire, Walqait, and Waldeba. These were part of Tigray. So we're not making it up. We're not propagandists. We are scholars and professors. So what the documentary evidence written long time ago, I'm presenting to the audience. And I hope Madam Congresswoman also listens to what I'm saying. Okay? And then we have number 8, evidence. Tedros, another Portuguese missionary. During that time, by the way, why were these old Portuguese people coming to Ethiopia? They were going all over. Portugal was a superpower. Another superpower was the Ottoman Empire, Ottoman Turk. The two of them were competing. Okay? So that's why Portugal was a superpower then. So Tedros also comes to Tigray and writes about so many features of the geography of Tigray. He actually says, this is very interesting now. The audience should listen carefully. He says, I've been to the highest mountains in Tigray. These highest mountains do have an ice cap on top of them. Ice cap or ice cap on top of them. And they are found in Simeon, Tigray, he says. Simeon, which is in Begemudr or in Gondar now. Okay? So we have so many of them. The number 9 evidence is John Houghton. John Houghton. And John Houghton writes a book entitled Abyssinia and Its People. John Houghton actually writes about so many things, but he focused on the monasteries of Tigray. And he says the most important of all monasteries in Tigray are, he says, number 1, Aksum, number 2, Debre Damo, number 3, Gundagunde, number 4, Walduba. So Walduba was part of Tigray. Okay? Then a number 10 evidence. The number 10 evidence I have is, this is the latest in terms of chronology, in terms of the historical chronology I was presenting today. Because this happened actually in the early 1940s now. Giovanni Palero is when the Italians invaded Ethiopia in the 1930s. He was appointed as governor of Wolkite. He was first actually appointed as administrator of Adigrat, but then he was relocated to Adiramat. And he wrote a book also. These guys write very well, and I thank them very much, really. He writes a book in the 1940s, and he says, the title of the book is Il Wolkite. It's in Italian. So my Italian is not great, but I've gone through it a little bit, and I can understand a little bit as well, with some translation, with some help of translation. In the book, he says, Adiramat and vicinity of all that area is part of Tigray. He doesn't even talk about anything else. He tells us that he is the governor of a Tigray district called Wolkite. Okay? This is Alero. And now Giovanni Alero dies in 1948. Very important. That date is very important. The date Alero died in 1948 was the time that Wolkite was incorporated into the Begemudr area, taken from Tigray. Okay? And we have evidence for this too. We don't need documentary evidence now. We have an eyewitness account of Tigrayan elders. They are still alive. They're still alive. One of them is Ras Mengesha Siyum. Ras Mengesha Siyum is still alive. He actually testified so many times, but he's written a book now. Okay? Yetarik Adara. But I've heard him talking about actually on a video that he said Wolkite was part of Tigray when my father means Rasio, his father, was the governor of Tigray. And he says, supporting his argument, that Wolkite was actually incorporated into Begemudr in 1948. Same year that Alero died, actually. Okay. And then we have another second eyewitness account, elderly Tigrayan, by the name Pitaurari Mu'uz Bayane. Pitaurari Mu'uz Bayane, I have seen the video myself. He says, Raya Kobo. Kobo was incorporated into Walla from Tigray in 1949. He says, I was there myself. Pitaurari Mu'uz Bayane was the advisor of the Emperor Haile Selassie. He was also a member of the Ethiopian parliament. And then he says, we actually said, why do you have to take Kobo from Tigray? And the answer they gave us, he says, was, it is for administrative purposes. You see? So Kobo was taken from Tigray to Walgait. The one I didn't mention is Salamti. Salamti actually was part of Begamta for a long time, long before Walgait, long before Kobo was incorporated into Wallo. Salamti was actually taken from Tigray in 1897, 1 year after the Battle of Adwa. That was done by Emperor Menelik. Emperor Menelik gave Salamti as a gift to his wife, Empress Taito. Okay? So, there's so many overwhelming evidences actually. I can go on and on and on and on forever. But let me stop right here and we'll continue with the other topics we have.
Thank you so much. Before to the last question I go, I would like to mention something. Everyone who's listening right now, please share this video to Karen Bass so she can listen and she can get the right information, because there are a lot of people out there misleading the world, disinforming the world. So please share and reach Karen Bass as soon as possible to communicate with Dr. Gehlawedewos Araia. That's my message. A second, Tedros Toshome was mentioning that Tigrayans are dividing the country. I don't know if he meant to say united the country, because he mentioned Ate Tedros, which is I don't want to talk about Ate Tedros' background. Some people say he's from Tigray also, but we're not about talking about someone from Tigray or from Amhara. Who did what is the main part of thing at this time. So I was told that he was a coward when Alula Abanaga was trying to fight and defeat the Italians and passed away with the well known in the world. He's a hero. As Johannes is the same. He defeated Egyptians and he passed away in Metama. And multiple Tigrayans were they were fighting to unite Ethiopia, not to divide Ethiopia. But he mentioned that Tigrayans are dividing Ethiopia, which is what would you say about this? The hero Ethiopians and the cowards, and he mentioned that he's his hero, someone who, I mean, I don't want to say who's a suicidal or something. When you fight until you've been killed by the enemy bullet. You cannot just kill yourself and called a hero. But whoever it is, I don't think Ate Tedros was done anything to unite Ethiopia than Ate Johannes or Alula Abanaga or Meles Zenawi or others. Once we discuss about this, what's your message for Congresswoman Karen Bass, or what do you advise her? Thank you so much. I know it's a little bit too much information for you to
that's fine. That's
answer,
fine.
but thank you.
What we're trying to do now is it's a history lesson by itself. It's good to actually people know. I think not only the honorable Congresswoman, but other Congress people in the United States should really take a lesson about Ethiopian history and politics, because it's a very complicated thing. Okay? So just because a certain Tedros lies, and they really lie, these people are pathological liars. I mean, doesn't mean they're going to get it. People have brains. People are going to question. Politicians are shrewd enough to go ahead and then look for other sources. So they're going to do that, I'm sure. But anyway, with respect to as a Tedros, I myself have written about the four emperors, respectively. Tedros was the first one to unite because after the post Zaman Masafent, he came to power. So at least he united the northern plateau of the Ethiopian. But the real architect was Atse Yohannes. They don't want to mention Atse Yohannes. They always skip Atse Yohannes. They never mention because they don't want to give them credit. Actually, Emperor Yohannes, by the way, Emperor Tedros tried, but he failed. He had an antagonistic relationship with the people and with others. He failed. But he tried to unite Ethiopia. And he's from Kwara, by the way. And the Kwara area mostly is Kamant. So I very much doubt he's from Tigray. However, he could be Amhara, he could be Kamant. But they put him as Kamant anyway, as Amhara. Okay? That's not important to me now. The most important thing is they always think the Tigray people divide Ethiopia. Actually, they united Ethiopia. As Yohannes came with a brilliant idea of a federal system. He was the first one to come up with autonomous regions, actually. Under Emperor Yohannes, there were several kings. One of them was Menelik of Shoa. The second was Tekla Haymanot, Nugus Tekla Haymanot of Gojam. And then there was not necessarily kings, but of Wallo, Ras Mikhael. And then it was divided that way. His own son, Araia Selassie, also took some part of Wallo. Wallo was divided into two. And then the Emperor Yohannes, actually, when Nugus Tekla Haymanot of Gojam and Nugus Menelik of Shoa want to really expand over to Jimma, and then they want to incorporate Jimma. Yohannes said, no, Jimma is also autonomous. Okay? So we had a Jimma, a Bajifar. All these autonomous regions, actually not so much like we had the federal structure, but it is more or less like that. He was the king of kings, but there were kings under him. It was fair, actually, for him. Some people who were advising the Emperor Yohannes criticized him. If you do that, you're not going to have power. You've given all your power to these people. But the rationale that Emperor Yohannes trying to pursue was, I'm not going to incorporate all power by myself. Okay, the way we should govern Ethiopia. He learned a lesson from Emperor Tedros, actually. He learned a lesson. He doesn't want to completely centralize Ethiopia. He decentralized it. That's what exactly the APRDF did. Instead of having a centralized unitary state, you have a decentralized, and then you have autonomous regional states. Okay? So this was very important, actually, in the history of Ethiopia. It was a milestone in the history of Ethiopia to have autonomous regional states. So with the Amhara, people like Tedros are talking so much, but even the Amhara Killil or regional state was actually came into existence because of APRDF. There was no Amhara Killil before. Tigray was there historically from ancient times, but all these Killils, all these regional states were actually formed from after 1991. Okay, so people have to know about that too. People don't know about these things. But anyway, history is history. So many books were written about Emperor Yohannes. I myself have written about him. And then he mentioned Alula too, a great hero, Ethiopian and Tigrayan and African hero, as a matter of fact. He was too fighting for Ethiopian unity all the time. They never actually, as far as I'm concerned, even in 1991, the APRDF actually really rescued Ethiopia from collapse. It could have collapsed after the Derg. Okay, you cannot unite a country by force all the time, like the Derg was doing and others were doing and others were doing. But if you create autonomous regions, they can actually side by side live peacefully. And there was relative peace of 27 years. Now these people are saying that 27 years were dark years. Dark years?
Yes.
They don't, these are disgruntled people. Really. They should be ashamed of themselves. If you don't want to give credit to Tigrayan people or to Tigrayan whatever, he's talking so much about the dam now. But who initiated that dam? Who built all these railways and then always the roads, all these universities in Ethiopia? I've lived for a long period of time in Addis Ababa. I know Addis Ababa very well. Now that city is completely transformed because of APRDF. Adama was transformed. Awasa was transformed. Bahar Dar was transformed. These cities were like village-like towns before. They flourished under APRDF. And I'm not trying to give all credit to APRDF. They had their own weaknesses too that I criticize in my book. When it comes to democracy, they did not do it. Okay? However, they've done very well in economic development. Okay, this is what we should do as scholars. Balance it out and write about it. Not just, the Tigray map, this map was of Tigray, this was the thing. There was no Western Tigray. You see, it could be ignorant of history, but they don't also want to accept the realities that history offers. They have to begin to understand that history, you cannot change history at all. You cannot change it at all. So that's what I want to say.
Great. Thank you so much. So our main purpose is just to reach and to convey a real message to Karambas anyways, the Congresswoman Karambas, who is living in California state. What's what information and advice do you want to offer a Congresswoman Bass based on your interview today? I mean, there are multiple things that you already mentioned, but specifically, what would you like to know instead of communicating with those who does not know about Ethiopia? They would have respected Tigray history instead of bearing the true history of Tigray and Ethiopia. She should have contact you or contact the right people, and this kind of misinformation would happen. So just to conclude our conversation, what's the real message to Congresswoman to stabilize Ethiopia and the current political instability and situation in Ethiopia right now?
Okay, very good. That's a good one, actually. By way of concluding, the message I want to convey to the Honorable Congresswoman is, number one, she has also to figure out the realities on the ground in Ethiopia by herself. She has advisors, she has so many staff in her office that can do research for her. She can reach out to people like myself or other people. There are so many Ethiopian scholars around, and then try to find that is a different perspective as well. She's a politician. I'm sure I do have this gut feeling that she's not going to completely imbibe or take what Tedros says. She will question. But the thing is, when he was talking on the video nonstop, she was simply listening. She was not asking him a question. So the only final point I want to say is we're here to help, cooperate with, because we're Americans too. We've lived here, although we came as refugees or naturalized citizens, we are Americans. So we can help out these people. We can help them with information, with advice, and so many things. That's all I want to say.
Great. Thank you so much for being with me today. Cyber Power of Tigray Media is so glad and so honor Dr. Gehlawedewos about I don't know anybody who Dr. Gehlawedewos means. He's the expert of Ethiopian politics. He's the expert of history. So this conversation needs to go directly to Congresswoman Karen Bass, so that way she knows or she can get the right information. Thank you so much for being with me today, and everyone. My broadcasting is ended here, and have a good day.
I thank you too, Mr. Ephraim. Thank you so much for actually this program.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.